Which Side Podcast is a proud member of the Which Side Media Collective.
This week's episode is brought to us by our Amazon affiliate link.
It's super simple how it works. All you need to do is next time you're planning on purchasing something through Amazon, use our link. They're super easy to use. You can find it in the show notes. You can find it at whichsidepodcast.com. But if you click through the link, we get a kickback of everything you buy. So it helps us out tremendously, especially if you're already going to be using Amazon.
Yeah, so you're not spending anything more, and Amazon's getting a little bit less, and they're giving that to us instead. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
If you're looking for something to grab, Jeremy recommends...
Ooh, the Foo Joy Classic Oolong Tea. It's the best oolong tea for the money you're going to get out there. 100 bags, about $9. I mean, come on. It's what I drink every single day.
10 cents a bag.
About 10 cents a bag, right? Mm-hmm. I drink it every single day. I keep a box at my desk at work, even though I get free tea at work. I decided to bring this in instead. It's great. If you haven't tried oolong tea, it's like the perfect stepping stone into that world of that nice, smooth blend.
Again with the tea talk.
Yeah.
So just go to whichsidepodcast.com, click on the Amazon affiliate link, and help us out. We get a little, they get a little less.
This is episode 150.
Yeah, we have Amber Canavan on.
She was arrested for an open rescue and just got out of jail. So you might have seen her interview in the New York Times or been talked about all over the place. But we sat down and talked to her. So stick around for that. Hey, Jordan, what news and events do we have going on this week?
Well, the Sea Shepherd ships are actually looking for some items, and they have an Amazon wish list. So if you go to that wish list and pick up some stuff for Sea Shepherd, you'll be helping them out. And if you use the link that we provide in the show notes, I'll also make sure that it goes through our Amazon affiliate link, so you'll help us both out.
Come on, help us both.
It's a win-win. This week's listener shout-out comes from the usual John Pawson. John wanted to say, read comics and zines, listen to punk rock, write to prisoners, read your fucking anarchist theory and history so you don't sound like a dick when you're talking about it, and donate to your favorite podcast. Thanks, John.
Sorry, John. I'll do better at reading more.
Yeah, geez.
I did just get Making Sense of Anarchism. I'm super stoked to read that one. It's the newest book from AK Press, by the way.
I don't really read anarchist theory at all.
That's why you're a fucking idiot.
That's why I always sound like a dick.
If you want to support the show and do a listener shout out, all we ask is donate at least $10 over at whichsidepodcast.com. That's how much it costs us to do one of these shows. So that's all we ask of you.
Not only do you get a shout out, but you get some pretty sweet swag as well sent to you in the mail.
Yeah, we're in the process of making that right now, so stay tuned for all of that.
Let's slingshot this over to Jeremy.
Wow!
September 23rd, 1978. Italian prisoners tear down walls to protest maximum security prisons.
Nice.
Also, on this day, inside of the Slingshot Personal Organizer, they have the note on here saying, decolonize your dick.
Is that the page with all the dicks?
No, this is not the page with all the dicks. That's why it kind of threw me for a loop. But it's in there.
It's great.
I love the Slingshot Personal Organizer, if you can't tell, for a bunch of reasons. So you should support them. They don't pay us for this. We just really like them. You can get one at a local info shop, which is preferable. And if you don't have a local info shop, get one at an online info shop like AK Press. I sincerely hope you enjoy this episode.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side? Which side are you on? 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 Which side are you on?
yeah, so wasn't really sure how familiar your listeners would be with the case, so I don't know if you guys had questions for me or if I should give a little overview or...
Yeah. Do you want to just give like a quick little overview of your case?
Yeah. Wow. Let's see. So this case has been going on for a long time. So the investigation that I was prosecuted for was an undercover investigation and open rescue at Hudson Valley Foie Gras in the southern tier of New York, down in Hudson Valley. And the investigation happened in 2011, and then I wasn't arrested until 2013. And they initially charged me with burglary and petty larceny. And recently, I entered into a plea agreement. I agreed to some jail time, which I've already served. And the case is just resolved a few weeks ago after 2 years of prosecution.
It always blows my mind how long it takes things to go through the judicial system.
Yeah, my favorite phrase is that that we're dealing with the black hole of justice. Like every county court, it has its own separate black hole that just sucks people into it. Sometimes they don't make it out.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I almost feel like it's completely set up to make it so fucking hard to fight anything that you just give up fighting a lot of times.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine how many people have entered into plea agreements who were completely innocent, and the only reason they did so is because they just couldn't fight anymore.
And a lot of times, like with activism cases, sometimes people are flying in from like other states and stuff, and so that long drawn out process just makes a lot of people just want to take a plea because they don't want to deal with it.
Absolutely. I had a 3-hour drive, and I lost count of how many times I've driven down there, but sometimes I would get down there and not even have court that day. My attorney would call too late, and I was already down there.
Yeah.
Even just that, a 3-hour drive, and sometimes having to rent a car to do that. That was quite a personal and monetary cost.
Definitely.
Yeah. I know Jordan had a case with home demos that like 6 people got arrested for a home demo, and most of them
it was like 12.
Was it 12? But most of them pled out, right? Because it was taking so long. Like 2 of you fought it. It took like 4 years or something.
Yeah, it took us 4 years, but we eventually won.
Yeah. I mean, if you can do it, that's the only way that we were able to get past those ridiculous burglary charges. That would have been a felony. The district attorney was trying to get me. He was recommending 6 months in jail. Luckily of that, I would have only have served 4 months, but still, that was absolutely ridiculous. And there was no way we were going to accept it. However, the only way to get him to finally agree to the agreement he agreed to was basically getting ready to go to trial. I was going to my suppression hearing. We're going to try to suppress some of the evidence that the prosecution said they had. And that was the day they finally offered us an acceptable plea deal. But it took that long and that much fight, and my attorney making a huge pile of omnibus, motions to finally get that far.
Did you think that your case in particular would get the amount of press that it has gotten?
I mean, you can always hope. The biggest press we got was early on. Well, I won't say early on because it was still like a year into my prosecution. But in February of this year, the New York Times picked it up only because we were able to offer them an exclusive interview with me. Of course, at the time, I couldn't really say too much. But, I mean, that's always the hope with open rescue. Anyway, that's the whole notion of open rescue, is that the farm's not going to prosecute you because of the massive media backlash against them. Apparently, Hudson Valley is not that smart because this is the second time they've done this now. So, and of course, I'm referring to the prosecution of Sarah Jane and Ryan about a decade ago for this very similar investigation and rescue.
Do you feel that What do you feel is the reason that open rescues aren't as popular in the United States as they happen to be in other areas?
Well, there was a little bit of a renaissance of open rescues, and I think some of the larger groups that were doing them, I think back to maybe the days of COK, Compassion Over Killing, and groups like that. They realized that there was such a risk to the rest of the safety of the continued operation of their organizations, and they decided to stop doing that. And then as far as smaller groups, they realized they didn't have the resources to fight it if they were prosecuted. I mean, I can't say for sure what the motivations for the larger groups or the smaller groups was, but I can only assume, it was kind of a part of that whole thing that was going on.
It kind of reminds me of back in the day when PETA was an actual ALF press office and huge spokesmen, and now they've distanced themselves as far as way they possibly can. Sure.
I mean, open rescue is definitely more, I guess, morally defensible and more easily defensible, and I felt supported by all sides of the movement, all sides of activists. And I think that is the power of open rescue, and it's kind of, it's not a scary masked thing, and it's very important to be kind of beyond reproach. I've talked about this quite a bit as well. I was a honors student, no prior history, and that really benefited me both in front of the judge and in speaking with the media about this, is that it turned out that this big bad factory farm was going after this, we won't say young college student, but going after this college student. So,
do you think that narrative is super important in doing these type of actions, and do you feel that it limits really the who can really really dive into these?
I don't think it necessarily limits it, but it certainly helps a great deal that I was able to use my character references to really make the farm look as ridiculous as possible. And it also helped. This is something I haven't really talked about too publicly, but I was almost expelled from my school when they found out about the New York Times article. And again, I avoided that, one, because I was graduating in 4 months, and two, because my academic, on the academic side, I was a very good student, and just the nature of the crimes that I was accused of, the school, I guess, kind of had to act, but at least they didn't expel me. I just had to do some community service and write a paper.
Huh. So, hold on, that kind of blows me away, that they were getting ready to expel you before the charges were finalized?
Yeah, so school misconduct rules are a lot more, it did blow my mind to start getting into it. I consulted with an attorney who's a professor at my school, and she was able to come and observe and advise me. And the burden of proof is not the same as is in a court of law. They just have to have a preponderance of evidence that you may have done that. And in that case, the preponderance of evidence was the police had obliged their request and sent them the arrest documents straight to the school.
Yeah, I mean, I knew they had those committees and stuff set up, but I've only ever heard them used as far as sexual assault cases and things like that.
Yeah, and that was one of my first questions. I was like, look, I didn't cheat on a test and I didn't harm anybody. But, I'd have to dig out my paperwork to see exactly which rule they said that I broke, but it had to do with any brushes with the law that could negatively impact the college or its faculty.
That's crazy to think about, that they would go after this type of action, considering the amount of dissidence that has originated on college campuses.
Yeah. They were fairly apologetic throughout the whole thing. But, we got the sense that even though they were going to put the least harsh punishment on me as possible, and of course they didn't like calling it a punishment, they called it learning.
Corrective action.
It was for my own good. Or even though they did that, I mean, there were people who were still extremely upset. I'm not sure if I can I swear?
Oh, yeah.
There were people who were extremely pissed off, including a number of faculty, a number of my professors who came out and supported me, and were just incredibly upset that the college was doing that. But on the other hand, I guess I have too much empathy for for people sometimes, but I feel like they also needed to be able to say that they did something in case anybody ever asked. So
it just seems so like crazy to me.
I know. I think I'm too forgiving about these things, but, and you'll see that as we talk more about my prosecution and jail time. But maybe I forgive people a little bit too much.
I mean, I guess that's a good thing to be forgiving and not hold on to things. But geez, Louise, that's just crazy to me. Like it seems enough that I'm assuming was it a state school or a private school?
It's a state school.
So the state's already coming down on you in one fashion, and they're like, well, we're going to come down on you on another fashion as well. Like, how much state oppression can one person take?
Yeah, it came at a really awful time. So, yeah, it did.
So when you were saying you're forgiving of the prosecution, like what do you have to be forgiving of? Did they do like crazy things or just?
Oh, they totally did crazy things. But I guess it could be seen as forgiving, but a lot of the times we're talking about how much pressure do we put on the district attorney's office, and this is a very small town. This guy has a history of prosecuting activists, or his office at least has a history of prosecuting activists, and I don't really see him as a movable object in this case. And a lot of the times I was like, well, people could maybe write a letter to the DA's office, or they could write a letter to a restaurant that serves foie gras. I'd rather have them do that. Mm-hmm. So I guess you could say that's a little forgiving, or just, I don't know. I'd rather have the entire time of my case, I was like, how can we divert this attention back to the animals and back to getting people to actually doing something that maybe they wouldn't have done otherwise if they hadn't have heard about my case and maybe been pissed off or energized or any number of effects that it seemed to have had on people. Just judging from all the letters and things I got, it really hit a chord with people.
Yeah, because I was going to say, like, is it kind of the idea of doing open rescue is to really put it in the court of public opinion, right? And if the DA doesn't give a shit about public opinion, it really makes it difficult. Yeah,
I mean, they definitely feel very protected in their small town, and they can do whatever they want there. And I don't see him changing his mind anytime soon. And in the statement I made to court during my sentencing, I made sure to say, I said, I'm not the first animal activist to pass through this court, and I'm probably not going to be the last. And I kind of put it on the judge's lap, like, what are you guys going to do about this? This isn't going to stop just because you prosecuted me.
Mm-hmm. So you kind of went in with the mindset of, 4 to 6 months' time, is that right?
That was what was hanging over my head for, yes, over a year.
And so what was your reaction when you got your actual sentence with, with the planning of that much time?
It was a huge relief. My attorney had been talking a little bit about pitching shorter jail sentences for a while, and the DA was, I guess, considering accepting it. However, it would have been a choice of having a felony on my record with no jail time, or having the misdemeanor petty larceny on my record. I'm sorry, did I get that right? the felony with no jail time or the misdemeanor with jail time. And they were, of course, being vague about the exact amount of jail time, but it would have been less than being sentenced to 6 months. So I had quite a bit of time to think about that. And for me, it was more important. I really didn't want to have petty larceny or burglary on my record for the rest of my life. And I also did have the side thought that, you know what, if they sent me to jail, people are going to flip shit about this. Like, that's just absurd. And, you know, I had been considering it for so long that as much as I didn't want to go to jail, you know, I was fairly mentally prepared for it that day that might be an outcome. And at that point, we really didn't want to take it to trial. So it was a good outcome that day.
I mean, while you're right, going to jail over it is super ridiculous. I think it's more ridiculous to be charged with a fucking felony.
Absolutely. I kept making it akin to like going on somebody's property and stealing a pack of gum. The farm really didn't care that 2 ducks were missing. Like I've said multiple times, they let ducks just die there every day without care, without any regard for, 1, the ducks' lives, and 2, for profit-wise, it's cheaper for them to let some of the ducks die and get a larger liver or get the liver quicker than providing proper care to them. So it's never been about the ducks, honestly. It's been about the footage and how bad it made them look. And if you look at the quotes from the farm in the articles, they've been quoted multiple times. Like, they made us look bad is basically what their quotes are.
Yeah, definitely. I've seen like clandestine rescues where the farm will not even admit that any of the animals were taken.
Oh yeah,
probably because they either don't notice or they just don't want that insurance claim.
Yeah, the documents that we were able to see early on from my arrest, from the documents that supported my arrest warrant, is they didn't notice the animals were missing until they were served with a lawsuit. So if we want to back up a few minutes, I can explain that. I think it's also important for people to know that no one was ever caught during this investigation or open rescue. My arrest became over a year later because I participated in a lawsuit that I signed a document authenticating the videotape and describing the conditions of the animals, that they had upper respiratory disease, that they had red raw skin. And unfortunately, the lawsuit was not heard in court. They decided that the animal rights group that was bringing the lawsuit did not have standing. And unfortunately, that was what ended up dropping my name into the farm's lap. So they were really lazy about the whole thing.
So, hold on. They said the group didn't have standing. So who would have standing over the animals? Would it be the property owner, which would be the farm itself?
So standing's a really tricky issue for animal and environmental activists. And I know that I'm not too terribly involved in this, so I'm not going to describe it too much because I'm not sure if I'm correct. But a lot of the times, such as like maybe the Sierra Club wants to sue on behalf of the wolves or something like that, the judge will find that this group doesn't have standing on the issue. It's not that it's not based on any of the merits of the case, the content of the lawsuit. It's just saying you don't have a right to sue on this party's behalf. I don't know if I'm explaining that.
No, yeah, it makes sense to me. It's just what's confusing to me is then who would have standing for these animals to sue.
That's a great question.
So, because like if you go by like the legal definition, it would be they're considered property, so it would be their property owners, but that's the farm itself. So who would actually have like the standing of defense? It would only be the state, wouldn't it? Which is just
not
ridiculous.
Going to do anything. Yeah, that's a huge problem. I know there have been a few changes, especially with New York state law, For instance, under stay-away orders and protective orders can now be placed on animals, protecting them from, say, an abuser in a household. So that's a really interesting turn of events, and it's definitely promising for farmed animals. Of course, they're always going to have some loopholes in there.
Do you know how your case would be different in the states that have like some of the more extreme ag laws?
That's something I've thought of a lot, and honestly, I mean, it depends because all the ag laws are a little bit different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Idaho just got rid of theirs. Mm-hmm.
Yes, yep. So, and I feel like those dominoes are just going to start falling pretty quickly, regardless. But you know, in the beginning, when I had been charged with the felony burglary, I mean, that was, as far as I can tell, far more serious charges than if it had been conducted in a ag state. Mm-hmm. However, this investigation was much differently structured than the more professional, I guess I'll say, undercover investigations. I was not an employee of the farm, for one, which is a big difference, which made me not protected under state whistleblower laws. Or I'm sorry, it might be federal whistleblower laws. I bet it's a federal law. So I was not protected by federal whistleblower protection laws either, because I was not an employee.
It's crazy to me that in order to be a whistleblower, you have to be considered an employee.
Yeah, I mean, there might be some leeway on that, but I think that law was specifically, you know, it's probably got some fairly specific wording.
What about like animal enterprise terrorism laws? Were you ever afraid of something like that?
I was a little bit, and I think any future activists who might consider doing open rescue should be very aware of and prepared for that. But as far as we've seen, most open rescue prosecutions have been deferred to local prosecution, meaning county, county court, being prosecuted in county court. Another interesting thing is, as far as I know, New York State is just a hot spot for these types of rescues. We have Adam Durand up in Walcott, New York, with Wegmans Egg Farm, and then we've got Hudson Valley here as well. I'm not aware of any other state that's had so many, prosecutions of activists, but also open rescues and investigations of this nature.
Do you feel that how do I word this? Like, do you feel that that's just what activists there are finding effective compared to like other areas, or what do you think is causing so many open rescues in that area?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, you know, when I was a 19-year-old, 18-year-old activist, and the gourmet cruelty case came out, and I saw that picture of Sarah Jane Blum holding that duck, you know, it made a huge impact on me. And, you know, it was definitely kind of one of those, not role model things, but I was like, it really just had an impact on me that they were beautiful photos. It was beautifully done. And I was like, wow, that really had an impact on me, at least, as a young activist.
So speaking about going back like that, what is your origins? Like, what brought you to veganism and animal rights and got you started?
I mean, I'd like to say I was on that track since a really young age. I went vegetarian when I was 14 and became an activist and went on from there. But I was always around animals. My mother owned a pet store when I was a kid, and my first acts were to always take the rats and mice out of the feeder bins and socialize them. And I had a special section of socialized rats and mice that could not be sold as snake food. And that really started off caring about the environment and about animals. And as soon as I got the internet, really, and found out about everything, I just dove right in.
What has been your family's reaction to your activism? Not necessarily just this case, but your activism over the years.
I mean, oddly enough, this prosecution really, really had a positive impact on how my family sees me, which, I kept it quiet from them until the last moment that I could, when I was indicted, and it kind of became a little more popular, and slowly the word kind of came out. Not that too many in my family reads the New York Times, but for years they thought it was a fad, and that it was the weird thing that I did. And when they heard that I got pieces of mail from other countries, and I showed them the pile of mail that I got, I think it finally dawned on them that there's other people out there, and that I'm not just a weird person.
You're just not one of the crazy loners.
Yes. So somehow being prosecuted and going to jail somehow legitimized the past decade of activism and veganism that I've gone down.
I think that's really funny. I think Jordan's mom had the same experience with some of his case. Just seeing the mass support that he got, because I know when he was first going through all the grand jury stuff, she was really talking to me all the time, why is this happening? Why can't we make him not do it? I'm like, we gotta support. And then she saw the outpouring of support from the community, and I think it really dawned on her, oh yeah, this is important, and there's support behind it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was so surprised. I was so nervous about my family finding out about it. Especially, my grandma, she, freaks out about everything. And I was so surprised by how much they were like, well, why is that district attorney doing that? Why can't your lawyer just kick you off? Why can't, And, I'd be like, well, okay, this is how it works. And I had a much more sober assessment of everything. But it was really nice to just have them. It was kind of that unconditional family support thing that I had never imagined could come out of them. So
how did jail match your expectations of jail, if that makes sense?
I tried going in it without too many expectations, but I guess it was what I would imagine it to be. It's loud. It was very cold and uncomfortable. I was expecting to have more weird interactions with the officers, and I was worried that either I would be too compliant and be angry with myself for being compliant, or mouthing off possibly. But it really, for the most part, wasn't the case. I was dealing with mostly female corrections officers, and there's a very thin line between who's behind the bars and who's coming to check on you. At least in this county jail it was. I'm sure there's varying degrees of difference between county jails and federal and state prison. Mm-hmm. For sure.
Do you think that your experience is pretty indicative of an average experience?
For an activist, or for... I don't know. That's a hard question to answer. I think everybody's experience is their own, and there's so many factors involved. Your personality, your health, both mental and physical health. I mean, there are people in jail with me that had so much worse off than me. They were maybe struggling with chemical addictions. One of the girls in there with me was 8 months pregnant and ended up having her baby chained to a bed a few weeks ago. Wow. People that didn't have any support on the outside, and their apartment's sitting there, and their landlord's probably going to throw all their stuff out because they don't have anybody they can trust to go get their stuff out of their house. So, I mean, I hate to say my experience in jail was positive. It certainly wasn't positive for the most part, but I made it through pretty good, considering.
One of the things we talk about a lot is prisoner support and the importance of prisoner support. Did this change your personal opinion or thought process, or how you approach prisoners, post prisoners, current prisoners?
Yes and no. I've been doing prisoner support for quite a while, both for some animal activists as well as some. I've been doing prisoner support for this Black Panther who's been in prison for. When I started, he'd been in prison for at least 30 years. It's probably been close to 40 now. Letters are certainly nice, and I got so many letters. I have a huge stack of letters from all over the country, and it was very nice to hear from people and hear what's going on in the outside world. And I guess I'm getting a little off track here. How did my so experiencing it on the prisoner side, is that what you're asking?
Yeah. Did that kind of change just your overall look towards prisoner support at all?
I guess not. I mean, I knew that the common requests are commissary, sending letters, and I guess for my case, it was very effective. And from what I've heard from other people who've been in prison for political acts, I mean, that it's, especially when you're in there longer. I mean, I had the benefit of only being in there for 4 weeks, so mine were coming. I was getting like 30 letters in one day some days. I kind of wonder if some of the people that have been in there longer, they're probably not getting that concentration.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe they're getting a little bit less little bits of support every time.
How did the other prisoners react to your celebrity and your in how much mail you got and all that other thing?
Yeah, they're really impressed. I was a little worried about jealousy. You know, I tried not to flaunt it around. Mm-hmm. But I would also, like, if I got a cute card from a kid drawing me a duck or something, I would show it to them. Or the news articles that people sent in. You know, there were some jokes about me being an informant or something, but I think it was all lighthearted for the most part. You know, once they actually saw that I was a real person and wasn't in there to rat them out or whatever they thought. So.
Oh, so other prisoners thought you were like a state plant?
It was mostly a joke, but a few times I made some comments because they started talking about their cases, and I was the one who put my hands up. I was like, hey guys, I'm kind of uncomfortable with you talking about that. You know, that's something for you to talk about with your lawyer.
Yeah.
And they're like, you know, because they would say these things about their own case and then be like, you're not an informant, are you? I was like, well, if I was, you just shouldn't have said it in the first place. You know, this is like, you know, ingrained security culture in me. And it was kind of shocking to me that they were just talking so openly about things. And it kind of weirded them out that I was just like, yeah, you guys you don't know who I am.
Holding mini security culture classes.
I feel like
exactly.
I have a very similar circumstance. Like when I was in the county jail that I was in, people would come up to me and just try to tell me all about themselves. And honestly, it's like you have to hold these little mini security culture things. Like, let me tell you about security culture.
Yeah.
And why you shouldn't be talking, because there's probably mics listening.
And you probably had the added problem of you're only in there because your refusal cooperation with the state. So they're like, I don't have anything to worry about with him. But
yeah. Yeah, it was a little bit of a shock, kind of going from being familiar with people having security culture and then seeing the complete lack of it in a place where, yeah, there were certainly could have been listening devices everywhere.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure there was.
Yeah.
I'm always surprised the lack of security culture in some activist circles still.
Yeah, that's true as well.
Yeah, it's always disheartening to me, but maybe that's just because I'm cynical now that I'm old.
Well, there's a whole new generation of activists coming up as well who you know, haven't been raised almost with that. And especially with how at least the animal rights movement is really shifting. You know, there's this huge influx of new activists who aren't familiar with what's been going on in the movement for the past 20 years, which is awesome on one hand, but on the other hand, yeah, they should probably study up a little bit. And I think there is a burden on activists who've been around a little while. One, not to scare people, because we saw what that did. I definitely went through a period of time where I was so frustrated because nobody would come out to anything. But at the same time, just being aware of things and just practicing some common sense.
You know, I mean, I remember in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was security culture meetings and classes and trainings multiple times a year in almost every place that I knew people were active. And now you don't hear about it very often of actually happening.
Yeah.
I remember distinctly having at every meeting a security culture discussion before the meeting.
Yeah. And
people would start to say, oh, we know about security culture. It's fine. We get it. It's like, no, we should talk about it for the people that don't know. And to refresh yourself.
Or maybe people who know and know better.
Yeah, exactly. So talking about like a new generation of activists coming up, what would you like to see happening inside the animal rights movement that isn't maybe happening as much as you'd like?
I think it's really important to keep that sense of history. And also, I mean, I've just been seeing this with how many victories that have been rolling in, and things changing so much, the public opinion. You know, we're really starting to have public opinion on our side, and really being able to change the way we even talk about the rights of animals or environment. And I don't know if I have I guess I just have some unfinished thoughts about that. Jeez. I should have thought that through a little more. It's hard to articulate right now. I guess in general, I'm very excited about it. And I think there's going to be so many new activists that don't have that kind of more all-encompassing thing. Maybe they came into the animal rights movement because pigs are really cute and, they realize chickens have personalities, but they don't have that background, this theoretical background, or this sense of history of the movement. So I think those two things, making sure that new activists have a theoretical background and knowing the background of the movement, where it's coming from and where it could go.
What would be the best way to bring that sense of history to the new activists, do you think?
Well, I mean, at least personally for me, there's a fairly active animal rights club here on campus, and I recently relinquished. I was the president of this campus animal rights club up until I graduated this past May, and I started realizing how much history we had just as a campus animal rights club. We had this huge banner of flyers of past events. We had so much history just in this little group. And I made it a point anytime that we were hanging out at a potluck or maybe driving somewhere in a carpool, I would just start talking back in, 2008, we had this crazy conference. And, I realized that unless I wrote it down or told them about it, they would have no idea. Mm-hmm. What history this small, kind of Rust Belt city has. Syracuse has a crazy history of activism. And not that I'm going to start an animal rights historian group, but I feel like somebody should.
Yeah, I was just going to say, that actually sounds like something that would be really helpful and beneficial. Or, if I wish somebody would, take to the times and do an in-depth large-scale documentary of the entire movement, not just certain subsects of the movement, but
yeah. And I hate to be that person. I hate when people say that. Just even when we had an email, or we had a PO box for this campus animal rights club, and I can't tell you how many people would write letters and be like, "There's this problem. You should do this." it was my constant refrain, like, why don't you do it? Like, we got our own stuff we're doing. Why don't you do that? There are some animal rights museums now. There are people who are trying to document things that happened. It's so powerful because sometimes I forget, like, oh my gosh, how much I've done. And you really forget that you're building on things. You can really lose sight of how much you've done just trying to keep doing the next thing. That'd be a really interesting project for somebody else. I don't know.
I believe the Talon conspiracy is documenting.
I was going to mention them, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Documenting a lot of the old prints and things like that.
I have a stack that I keep meaning to scan in to send to them.
Yeah, I've got some old posters we inherited. So the campus animal rights group now has been going on. It's been around for 12 years, which is really long for a campus club, considering there's usually 100% turnover every 4 months. But this animal rights club at Syracuse University, we used to have these offices, these cubicles on campus, and we took it over. And somehow we came into possession of these old posters from the previous Animal Rights Club. And ironically, it had the same acronym, SARO, but it was Student Anti-Anthropocentric Reasoning Organization. And the current one is Syracuse Animal Rights Organization. But I've kept those, and I've always meant to maybe send them to either Talon Conspiracy or maybe one of these animal rights museums in are you guys still there? Okay.
Yeah.
I thought I accidentally closed a window. To one of these museums because they're these old, brittle, printed on like the really old black and white plotter printer, and somebody went through great trouble to make these back in the day. And they somehow survived. It's pretty amazing.
That's awesome.
You should totally make sure that stuff survives. I will randomly remember like just little things. I'll be like, I wish I just had like those relics of it. But thinking about like your activist history, what is like your favorite little bit of activism that just holds that little special place in your heart for you?
Well, one thing that surprised people is that, this investigation, although it did take up a huge part of my life, was not the main activism I've done in my life. I don't know if I can pull out the biggest thing that holds a place in my heart just because there's been so many things. It's not really coming to me right now, but it's usually an emotional thing. So I've done a lot of cat rescue stuff just because they were right in my backyard. So
yeah,
probably some of the more personal rescues that really hold close to your heart. But on the other hand, a lot of activism, you could just get in this rut of responding to all the cats in your backyard, and you get a much stronger emotional reward for doing that. But there's also the days that the weeks that I spent organizing a speaking date or going on a protest tour or handing out 1,000 leaflets. So who's to say which of those helped more animals? It's hard to say. Could I have rescued that one cat and had that emotional, little bump? Or sometimes there's really boring work to be done for activism that isn't very exciting or close to your heart, but it still needs to get done. So I know that's a really boring answer, but...
And I applaud the lawyers and the legal activists. Those guys just paperwork, but they pass things all the time.
It's funny when you see like an animal rights lawyer and they get excited over like doing paperwork and everything, and you're just like, I totally can't do it, but I'm so glad somebody's doing it.
Yeah, I can't deal with I hate bureaucracy, especially after dealing with the legal system. I had the choice to go into a pre-law track for my major, and I was like, no, I just can't do it. I know that there's so much to be done on that front. I mean, there's so many things you can do from a policy standpoint, and that's eventually what's going to happen if this movement's going to make any real changes. Those eventually are going to start happening, but man, I'm not going to be the one to do it.
What challenges do you see happening in the movement with the rise in popularity of animal rights?
Well, I mean, when anything becomes mainstream, it's going to get watered down, right? So I think that is already happening a little bit. But like I said, having that theoretical background, people might get into it and really be into vegan food or whatever the trendy stuff's happening. But I think it's really important to catch them before they slip back and hit them with some more, maybe not academic, but something to really back it up when they're getting past that point.
Do you have anything that's like go-to that you like to give to people, whether it's like a book or a documentary, a zine or anything like that?
I mean, Earthlings certainly had a huge effect on me, but again, I think I have too much empathy for people. I don't ever want to have the guilt of like doing that to somebody, making them watch it. When it came out, we did a screening in Syracuse at a local theater, and we did it for free. It was a free admission to come see Earthlings. We actually got about 50 people to come.
Oh, wow.
And the person I was organizing it with, he had this thing about showing people really graphic stuff. And I was a little uncomfortable with it because, yes, the graphic stuff can really have an effect on people. But again, you hit somebody with an emotional message, eventually you need to follow it up with a logical backing. And what I did was end up writing a letter, almost like an apology letter to people, because I knew people were going to walk out on it, right? Sure enough, about 20 minutes in, some people walked out, and I made sure they all got this letter saying, I'm sorry, I agree, this is a very emotional thing, it's very graphic, but, we hope that you'll continue fighting. If this made you so upset, there's a reason, and it's a totally correct response to have this reaction to this video. That being said, geez, I don't have a fallback video or book. I guess I probably should have one, but I don't. It's really so based on each person you're talking to.
I think that's a really good idea, though. I've never really thought about giving something to somebody on the way out when they leave.
Yeah.
I think that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I just predicted. I knew people would look, they didn't know what they were getting themselves into. Mm-hmm. I thought it was an incredibly important thing for people to see. And I can't believe we got 50 people to come to it. But I knew there were people who were just going to be like, nope, I'm not putting myself through this.
What's interesting about that film is when we were talking to Shauna about it, he said it was very challenging to make sure that it wasn't too much that totally made people just shut down. And the way it is now does make some people completely shut down. But, just him talking about finding that balance in the movie is crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if you're going to use graphic things, and this comes from my social scientist background, this is kind of what I went to school for, is, to persuade somebody, you can use those emotional appeals and graphic and very emotional footage of animals dying with the music, that really does hit people at a very deep level. But you do need to follow up with hope. You can't just batter them over the head. They need to feel some hope and a way to fix it at the end. You can't just hit them with the yucky stuff and hope that they'll come to that conclusion.
I feel like for a long time I I got super desensitized to all of it. Like having Meet Your Meat in the background playing at everything that I was doing.
Yes.
Like you just get desensitized to that kind of imagery, and then letting it go for a while and then coming back to it, it can really hit you again. So
yeah, I can't tell you. I used to be able to narrate Meet Your Meat without seeing it. Is how, yes, I had the very similar experience. Over the past year, I've become a lot more sensitive to it. I think I had really become desensitized to it, and I'm finding myself, I used to force myself to watch all the new investigations, and then I realized that unless I needed to do it for instructional reasons, like, yes, I need to be able to describe how those baby chicks were being ground up alive. But if it was just the next video of cows getting punched in the face, I realized that I wasn't doing myself any good. It wasn't helping those cows, and I already had the emotional backing. It wasn't recommitting myself. That, and I read some articles about that. I wish I could quote which article it was, but it was basically to that effect. Like, why are people why are activists who already care about the issue torturing themselves by watching this? It's one thing to be a witness, and I talked to this a little bit as far as actually being on the farm and being a witness to these animals at Hudson Valley. That was very important, to be the witness for them. But just torturing yourself with all this animal cruelty footage was not a good use of my activist time at all.
I always feel really bad when I don't watch them, and I don't watch them all the time for that same reason you're talking about. I don't find it doesn't help me at all, right? But I always feel a little bad that I don't, because then I always feel like, well, when people talk about it, I can't say, well, I've seen it, this is it,
You can't really recommend it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough to find out when, I guess, to decide that. And I think that is that guilt ingrained, that we feel like we have to witness it all. And trying to find out when, yes, I'll watch them sometimes but I make sure it's instructional first. Or am I just clicking on it because I feel obligated to witness what was happening to them?
See, what's interesting is I was always kind of okay with the Meet Your Meat, like you guys were talking about, but with Earthlings, combined with like Joaquin's narration and then the music by Moby, it's just put together in such an emotional way that it's not just a visual impact. It just hits you in so many levels.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't watched it in several years, but I still remember, I think it's very early on, and it's a dog in a garbage truck. And I mean, sometimes at night I wake up with that like image in my head. And, yeah.
Yeah, well, now we're all thinking about that.
I know, now I'm starting to tear up a little bit.
Well,
exactly what we're talking about.
Exactly. Yeah. But that's why I really like some of the new wave of films that have come out, like Vegucated, where they don't necessarily focus on the horror so much. It gets into the whys and everything, but not so ingrained. So it's like a little softer of a punch to people.
Yeah, and the effect of how much we need the social aspect of supporting people, new activists and new vegans. Our movement's gotten so good at getting people to go vegan. Now we really need to step it up and figure out how do we get them to stay vegan and to stay activists. And I know there's so many groups out there with activist support resources and vegan mentor programs. And I'm glad we finally caught this problem that we didn't know we had by doing research and finally figuring out that.
Being vegan is the easy part. Staying an activist is the hard part.
Yeah. I know a ton of people who are just vegan and have no intentions of being activists. I don't know how to make them activists, or if we should just give up on them and find all the new vegans who have all the energy.
I'll be honest, my daughter is the one pushing me now the most. So that's always good.
Yeah.
So
Some young blood, some energy.
it's totally needed. Yeah, she's gonna push me to go to my first circus protest this year in years. I haven't gone to a circus protest in years, but she's like, "Nope, I'm going. I have friends that want to go. We're all gonna go together." I'm like, "Okay, we'll go."
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was at a circus protest a few months ago, and a woman brought her entire class. She was a teacher, and it was awesome.
Way cool.
Just having all these kids. She brought like 20 kids to protest the circus, and I mean, I couldn't have imagined that happening 10 years ago.
Oh, God, no. Not at all. It'd be just the opposite. It's classes going to the circus.
Yeah. And we definitely didn't see any school buses going in, so. Well, it was the summer, so I guess that helped a little bit, but.
Well, how can, people follow your work that you're doing and follow you and get in contact with you?
The support page on Facebook is pretty active. I'm actually writing a little blog post right now, tentatively titled "How My Prosecution Was a Win for the Animals," and I'll be working on that today. So my support page is facebook.com/support4amber. So if anything else comes up, I'll be posting things. Obviously, the farther it gets from now, there'll be less of a need for that support page, obviously. But as we get more documents from the court, like we've requested the transcripts from some of my court dates, where either myself, the judge, or my attorney said some pretty interesting things. And there was one other thing. Oh, the thing that I hate mentioning is that we still have quite a few legal fees, and there's information on my support page to donate to that as well. All my legal support was done through the Animal Protection and Rescue League, which is the organization that kind of spearheaded this whole investigation. It was a bi-coastal investigation. There was an investigation into the California foie gras farm, which is no longer in operation because of how goddamn effective this movement is these days. And so they are running my legal defense fund, and thank God there's going to be no more attorney's fees to add to it. So at this point, it can only go down from here as we get more donations. So
I love it when people keep their support pages updated with things like that. So please, continue to do that. It's an amazing thing. It's an amazing resource later down the road.
Yeah, I definitely intend to, if it can morph into something else as well, now that I don't need support, I'd love to turn it into a support page for all the ducks in prison that, who are also need prisoner support. So.
Well, we end every episode saying "fuck, shit, damn." Would you mind saying it for us this week?
Fuck, shit, damn.
Yeah. We got to get our explicit rating somehow.
Well, perfect. Well, thank you so much for being on.
Yeah, it was great talking to you guys.
This week you heard
Spacewalk by the Urban Myth Club.
Right now you're listening to
Introvert by KOAN Sound.
iTunes. We had a couple people go in there and give us some ratings this last week. Thank you to everyone who did that. We didn't get any reviews, but we got the ratings, so thank you for that. That still helps us out. But if you haven't yet already, go into iTunes, give us a couple stars, preferably more than 2, but whatever you feel is appropriate. Somewhere in the 4 to 5 range, maybe.
I mean, considering you listened to the whole episode and you're still listening.
Yeah, give us some stars, write a little review in there, throw it up for everyone. It helps out the show. Show the appreciation for the free content you just got.
If you haven't yet, be our friend on social media. We have all the social medias, not really, but the main ones. And you should be our friend. We often say things on there that we don't say on the podcast. And by often, I mean every day. So give us a like, give us a favorite, give us a follow, give us whatever the thing is that you give us. Give it to us.
Give it to us.
Hashtag
Give it to us.
give it to us. If you tweet us with hashtag give it to us, maybe I'll give you a prize.
Fuck shit damn.
Fuck shit damn.
Which Side Podcast is hosted and produced by Jordan Halliday and Jeremy Parkin of the Which Side Media Collective, with web design by Jordan Halliday and sound design by Jeremy Parkin. Booking by Mari Halliday. Theme music by Commandantes. Go to whichsidecollective.org to check out the other shows in the collective. As always, fuck shit damn.